Chapter 2, First Encounters, First Concepts. In Chapter 2, we learn about the 4 European countries who play the largest roles in colonizing the Americas, but we'll narrow our focus to 3, Spain, England, and France. As we saw in Chapter 1, after the Reconquista, Ferdinand and Isabella of Spain commissioned Christopher Columbus to sail west looking for a trade route to Asia. Columbus proved to be a better explorer than administrator. On Columbus's first voyage, he landed in San Salvador, sailed to Cuba, and Hispaniola. Columbus brought 6 Taino, the native peoples from the islands, back to Spain. Our textbook tells us the world would never be the same from this point. Columbus's second voyage was much larger than his first. He had 17 ships and 1,200 men. Columbus would force the Taino to labor searching for gold. On Columbus's third voyage, he tried to set up a government in Hispaniola, but people complained about their hard lives and sent Columbus back to Spain in chains. Columbus made his fourth and final voyage in 1502. From that point, he never governed again. Spain was the leader in American conquests. Portugal mostly focused on trade with India and Africa and made some conquests in South America. In 1494, the Treaty of Tordesillas was signed by Spain and Portugal to separate colonial holdings, trading, and sea routes claimed in the New World. Claims east of the line of demarcation belonged to Portugal. All claims west of the line of demarcation belonged to Spain. This showed a total disregard for native peoples. With new trade routes and colonial claims, the world shifted from land-centric to ocean-centric. Portugal and Spain became Europe's primary links to Asia and the Americas. In 1513, Balboa reached the Isthmus of Panama and became the first European to see the Pacific while sailing for Spain. In 1519, Ferdinand Magellan reached the tip of South America. In 1520, Magellan reached the Philippines, where he would die. In 1522, Magellan's crew returned to Spain and became the first crew to sail around the world. In the 1500s, England and France started to assume larger roles. In 1519, Hernando Cortés of Spain started his conquest of the Aztec Empire. Cortés was greeted by Montezuma, the Aztec emperor, with gifts, and Cortés saw this as a sign of submission. He set out on a 2-year conquest to take over Tenochtitlan, the capital of the Aztec Empire. Cortés was helped by tribes who opposed Aztec rule. Cortés renamed Tenochtitlan Mexico City and made it the capital of New Spain. In 1532, Francisco Pizarro, who's pictured on the right, led an army of 168 soldiers and defeated Atahualpa, the Incan emperor. Francisco Pizarro became viceroy of Peru, and the purpose of the colony was to supply Spain with gold and silver. The 4 factors that led to these 2 Spanish victories were guns, steel swords, horses, and European diseases that the Spanish brought with them to the Americas. Bartolomé de las Casas helped Spain conquer Cuba. In return, he was rewarded with an encomienda, land and slaves. De las Casas, though, became a priest and began writing to Spanish authorities and monarchs to change the way Spanish colonists were treating Native Americans. Eventually, Queen Isabella called for better treatment of Native Americans, but it led to little or no change. Please pause your video here and take a few minutes to answer the review questions from Chapter 2, Section 1. Chapter 2, Section 2, The Birth of Protestantism. In 1455, Johannes Gutenberg invented the printing press, pictured on the left. The printing press allowed ideas to spread quickly and increase the overall knowledge of Europe. This also helped bring Europe out of the Middle Ages into a more modern period. In 1517, Martin Luther, who's pictured on the right, from Germany, posted his 95 Theses that challenged some teachings of the Catholic Church. The main teaching it challenged were indulgences, which are buying pardons or forgiveness. These actions led to a split in the Catholic Church called the Protestant Reformation. Protestantism would spread mostly through Central Europe, as well as to England and Scotland. In the 1500s, Europe was mostly governed by nation-states instead of unified governments that we see in present-day Europe. The different churches sought to impose their religious beliefs on others. In 1555, the Peace of Augsburg created the coexistence of Lutheranism and Catholicism in Germany. The Treaty of Westphalia, which ended religious wars in Central Europe, decided that the ruler of each country or nation-state would decide the faith of each nation. Please pause your video here and try to answer these 3 review questions.